the thing is, the truth is, once you understand elite theory, every system is basically the same, regardless of what it calls itself.
Right.
Okay. Now you can get harder managerial regimes and softer ones. Okay. I would say that our system is a kind of soft dictatorship.
Yeah.
It's still a dictatorship, right? And who is the dictator is somewhat hidden and diffuse. I think a lot of people feel that there needs to be a change.
Yeah.
The big test for the current system is, can it? This was the question that was asked of the Soviet Union when it needed to reform Gorbachev. And it couldn't.
It couldn't, no.
It collapsed in on itself. It couldn't do it. This is the big question being asked of America, Britain and the West in general is, can it? Can it? Are these systems now too big to actually be reformed in any real way?
Morning, Neema. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so I've been very excited about this. Stumbled across your book. Somebody recommended it to me, the Populist Delusion, which I weirdly, I don't know if you know, there's a Spotify episode where it's two guys discussing the book chapter by chapter.
Right, yeah, I think I know who did that. Yeah. Okay.
But since then, I mean, it was a while ago I discovered your book, and we're going on a journey trying to figure out what the fuck is going on in this country. But I've got a really interesting first question for you regarding democracy. A mistake, illusion, or both?
Okay, a mistake and illusion. Well, it's definitely an illusion. Mistake is more of an interesting one, because let's just describe it how it is. It's an extremely effective strategy for the ruling class, especially when you have this idea that there are two sides, there are two different options, and that you personally have a stake in who wins. And then depending on your vote, the fate of the country is changed, etc. And the system, I would say, goes to great lengths to keep this basic idea, this basic illusion going. And it has all sorts of strategies, containment, I call it, in order to keep this basic idea going. And in a way, the genius of the system is that even after people see what we're about to talk about, even when they see the trick, it's got ways of reeling them back in and giving them new hope and new delusions to fall for. And I would include in this, sorry to say, what is called populism now. This idea that Nigel Farage and reform are some sort of threat to the system, for example, or even that Donald Trump in America, now after 10 years, is still something that the ruling class in America have not come to peace with. And that really he's still railing against the actual power structures. I mean, at this point, I think we've seen enough to know that even those are fictions, basically to reel you back in, to bring you back on various different reservations, which is not to say that there are not genuine rival factions in the ruling class who back these various parties who have different interests. But it is still, I mean, does anybody really believe, as an example, that we're gonna vote reform, and within the space of a few years, Nigel Farage is going to dismantle the Blairite state? I mean,
I think a lot of people do believe that. I think that's the illusion.
I think a lot of people do believe it.
Or hope,
but I mean, I don't believe it, and I don't. I mean, I see no. I don't even think that he'd be put in front of us as an option if some element of the permanent security state was not at peace with this idea. And in fact, you could argue that for the past year or so, ever since Keir Starmer came in, the media have actively been priming the idea of a Prime Minister Farage, probably for about a year now, if not more. I mean, it's kind of been normalized and pushed, much like how a pro wrestler is pushed in pro wrestling, and just like I don't know if you're familiar with the world of pro wrestling at all. It's,
We know it, don't we, Connor? We went. How old were you? 5, 6? We saw John Cena.
You saw John Cena. Well, I mean,
Yep.
exactly like when John Cena first came in and he was pushed as a hero, as a man of the people type thing. Depending on which newspaper you read, Keir Starmer is currently the big heel, the villain who needs to be taken down. And this is the basic frame that the system is kind of happy with. It's left versus right. It's Tory versus Labour, or now it's Labour versus Reform, or even more farcical, Ed Davey versus Nigel Farage. I mean, it doesn't really matter how they want you focused on these sorts of fights. It's happy with those fights, and I'd even go as far as to say that it's happy with what people have called the culture war.
Oh, hold on, though. But is this an organic system? Is this just the way the incentives work? Or is there like a Vince McMahon in the background?
Well, I mean, since I wrote Populist Delusion, and we can get into some of those basic ideas of elite theory soon if you'd like, but since I have written that book and looked into it more and more and more, I've been really shocked by how little they have left to chance, pretty much since World War II. There's some mind-blowing books I've read. There's one book called Who Paid the Piper, which basically shows how the CIA, which was had a little department being run by James Burnham himself, who was the author of the Machiavellians and the Managerial Revolution, which I talk about in Populist Delusion. He had an entire division devoted to funding different cultural projects, pushing different, down to the level of reviews of particular historians in tiny little academic journals. And the story of that book is how the center left, the non-communist left, was basically invented by the FBI, by the CIA, but also the post-war center right was basically invented because the American state, if you want to put it that way, didn't want it being communist Soviet style. They didn't want the left being communists, and they didn't want the right being Nazis or fascists or something like this. So they had to come up with these new options. So you can actually watch them being created, funded. Another book I came across, I talked about this on a show with Aaron McIntyre. There was a little kind of shadow service that again worked for one of the arms of the security state, that was set up basically to manage the civil rights movement, to keep the civil rights movement being the Martin Luther King thing, not the Malcolm X thing, for example, and to basically push it in a certain way to make sure. And even in kind of recent history in Britain, we've seen examples like, for example, when there's a terrorist attack and, you have a grieving family, there's somebody sent by the security services to have a little word with them to basically manage the message, the little nudge unit, to make sure that it's look back in anger. Don't look back in anger. Candles, forgiveness. So basically to set that narrative as to what happens after a big event.
Well, we just had that with Charlie Kirk's wife forgiving the killer in front of the world.
So what I'm saying is, the more I've looked into it, the more I'm struck by how little they actually. In America, they talk about the paranoid style of politics, like Alex Jones, people like that, conspiracy theory. But the more I've looked at it, it's like a kind of paranoid style of government where they really don't let anything to chance at all.
But is that just incentives? Or is there a smoky room where a group of elite lizard people sit around and make decisions?
This is the thing. It's very hard for us on the outside to know. What we can do, what is interesting now in this moment, is that they're increasingly just open about these things. They just publish them on the website, or there's a network of NGOs, for example, that writes these white papers that then get pushed up to the government, and they basically openly talk about what they're doing. I mean, I think language I saw on certain documents from the Home Office was like behaviour management. You know, they're trying to nudge you in a certain mode of thinking and a certain mode of being, which, maybe it's just a necessity for managing a mass state. Maybe, you know, they talk in elite theory about, the problem of mass and scale, which then requires technical specialists, bureaucrats, and so on, to manage all of this and to keep people kind of doing as they're meant to do in that system. So maybe these things are just necessary, but they do go on. They do go on. So what I'm saying is the notion that the system would not be all right with reform becoming the government is just, when you start looking at it, is just farcical. For example, we happen to know that even before reform got any MPs, they were vetting people out. You know, you had my buddy Carl Benjamin on a couple of weeks back. I mean, he runs that big show, Lotus Eaters. Several of their hosts were set to be, you know, running for reform. They were told they couldn't be part of it because they were extreme or whatever. What was their extreme comments? Well, they were for mass deportations. It's funny because now
that's part of the policy.
Now reform are saying that.
Yeah.
But the key point is not what they're saying, but who is saying it, who is there. And they are happy with the people who are there, right? They weren't happy with Rupert Lowe for some reason. Maybe he was not non-compliant, maybe. So, and he was very quickly pushed out of the party because they're preparing to be a compliant government, essentially. Yeah.
Or, I mean, I always find with these things, Neema, that I can make an argument based on it being organic and incentives. Mm-hmm. And I can also then make the argument there's like people pulling the strings. And if there's people pulling the strings, I can make an argument the people pulling the strings it's still organic. You know, whether it's, I mean, look to the US, whether it's Gates and Ellison and the Soros Foundation, I can see their incentives. Mm-hmm. I can see the incentives of the media. And so I usually come back to, I think it's organic and incentives. But when people say they, I'm like, well, they, who, why, what?
Well, I mean, the thing is that you're right to a certain extent. If you go down enough, you will get to human action, as Mises would say.
Yeah.
You'll get to an actual person with a set of motives and a set of incentives, as you say. And then you're thinking, well, okay, if this guy wants to do this, what should he do? Here's his budget. And then you can work it out. And yeah, to a certain extent, that is what is happening. But there is also, how can I say, there's people who they'll allow at the table, and there are people who are allowed to play that game, if you want to put it that way. And there are people who they're not happy with playing that game. And it's often difficult to figure out who they're happy with and who they're not. But I would say, generally speaking, just being allowed into the media discourse is quite a good tell, right? If the newspapers are full of it, if it's a household name, if it's been entered into the newspaper of record, then it becomes like part of a story. That there's like a family of faces that everybody's heard of. Certain people,
mm-hmm.
There are other people who nobody's heard of, who don't get entered into that discourse. Do you understand what I'm saying?
So does that come from intelligence services, really?
I mean, see that it's different. I'm not saying that every single thing that happened is as a result of intelligence services. I'm saying if it gets to a certain threat status to the system, they are there and they will get involved. I mean, we saw pretty good example of when they got involved quite recently with the Southport situation.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you know, what happened there? There was a few. There were a few people kicked kicked over a few bins. They were unhappy about what happened in Southport. Starmer very quickly, call them far right, put loads of people in jail in the space of a week, etc. But then, when people see, these are things people don't remember, a set of dates were published about when there were going to be further protests, further action. And these were publicized by various different people. And then what happened is that on those dates, a bunch of anti-racist protests took place instead, counter-protests. And then on that day, on that morning, every single newspaper in the country, whether it was the left-wing ones, Guardian, Independent, or the so-called right-wing ones, the Daily Mail, Sun, Telegraph, they all ran basically the same front page that day. You can look it up. There's something you could look up. They all ran a front page saying, hate will not win. The anti-racists won this day. And that, when you see every single front page all the same on the same day, is a pretty good indication that on that occasion, they got involved.
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines the world's most responsible currency the right way. Because the future depends on it.
So
Yeah.
So someone like Tommy Robinson,
Yes.
is he a problem for them then? Because he is part of the media. We see him, he is interviewed, but usually on the fringe areas, like someone like myself or trigonometry, but he can rally hundreds of thousands of people to come together and have a march. Yet the front page. So what disturbed me about that? We went down to see what it was about, and we were backstage where they had funneled one group of people on the march to a dead end. If you imagine Whitehall, 3 rows, I think it might have been Horse Guards, but you had the stage for the free speech march.
This was the Tommy rally a couple of weeks back. Yeah.
Then there was a big gap with police cars and fences either side, and then there was the counter protest. But there was a road that led to the middle where a bunch of the Tommy Robinson protesters went. They were funneled to a dead end. They couldn't hear the speeches. Kicked off a little bit. I mean, how many people would you say, Connor? Like 30, 40 people maybe kicked off, lobbed some bottles. It wasn't good, but it was very minor. We didn't see anything else, any other disturbances that day. Yes, some people were probably using the street as a toilet they shouldn't, but it was generally really good spirit, like well-spirited. Daily Mail led with a video on the homepage, and so everybody just went, these are far-right thugs, far-right hooligans, fascists. But they didn't lead with anything like that when it was BLM protests, which were also violent, or pro-Gaza. Yeah, Horse Guards Avenue. So they fed them all down there, but actually everyone else had come up Whitehall. And that red dot was just below that red dot is where it kicked off. But I was thinking at the time, hold on a second, I'm not far right, I'm not a fascist. But I'd seen plenty of videos, I've seen so many videos on Twitter of violence at far left protests. I've seen plenty of Antifa protests, BLM protests that got violent, but they never lead with the violence in that scenario. So, and then I look at Tommy, obviously not a perfect character, and the amount of times he's been to prison, how he's put in solitary, now he's facing terrorism charges because he won't open his phone to them, potentially prison again. I was like, is he like a chink in the matrix for them? Is he a problem?
Okay, so this is going to be quite a kind of convoluted answer when it comes to
fine.
this. So on the BLM, on the Antifa front, I remember even at the time, even back in 2020, during the Summer of Love, I was saying like, look, because everybody was freaking out saying, oh, this is it. This is the communist revolution. It's coming type thing. And I said, no, what BLM and Antifa are counter-revolutionary forces, shock troops for what we used to call the regime, okay, or what we might call now for one of these two power factions that are currently active and alive in politics. So they tacitly had state backing, at least for a period. Whether that still exists or not, I don't know. But certainly back in 2020, that was being pushed. They had cover from the media. The police were told to take a knee or to stand down. They were classically counter-revolutionary forces, or I've been reading a book recently called What is a Counter Gang? Right? They were a counter gang, not an organic kind of street group. Clearly they were being backed and funded and organized, possibly by, organizations close to the Democrat Party, something like this. Okay. And so you don't get something like that happening without some degree of organization and without some degree of backing and funding. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is where this may get a bit controversial. When it comes to Tommy, he will also have certain backers, certain forces who are alive in politics behind him who may have their own agenda. They may have their own set of objectives that they're trying to achieve. And I've talked about this recently. I would say this year, there's been a very strong push from people in that sort of network to push this idea that we're heading towards a civil war. We're heading towards some sort of civil conflict. It's going to be, country is so far gone. Right? We're heading to some kind of crunch thing, and it's going to be, I don't know who are the two sides. This is a question. I mean, implicitly, it's Tommy and the lads against, Rainbow Coalition and maybe people who support Palestine, something like this. And so this is where kind of being into elite theory as I am, I'm always looking, well, who is the organized minority? Where is that human action? What are their incentives? So you can say, well, on one hand, we should probably define terms, organic, okay? Yeah. From the point of view that certain very rich people are trying to make things happen through funding various networks, we could say, well, that is organic, okay? From the point of view of it's just a kind of bottom-up thing. People are just in the pub and they've had enough and now they're going to start rising up type thing, which is often what people think about when they talk about bottom-up, right? That really never happens. There's always somebody, even in the situation where a group of lads are in the pub and they feel like they want to do something, even in that small situation, there's going to need to be somebody who takes the lead, somebody who starts to make decisions, and even that small cadre could become a quote unquote organized minority if they actually got organized. But I would say a huge number of things in our system are geared towards not allowing that to happen. If it scales up enough, then the people we were talking about earlier will start to, use tools, surveillance, infiltration, etc. So it's very hard to get away from it. It's very hard to get away from that.
You know what I'm thinking, don't you, Connor? So we had this weird incident the other day. So I mentioned I've put private security into my hometown,
mm-hmm.
and I've also interviewed some well-known, potentially controversial people. And if they track me and they see, oh, look, he's now talking to Neema and he's talking to Curtis Yarvin.
Mm-hmm.
Is Pete a threat? Should he be on a list? But the other night, I was in America, Connor texted me, and a police car pulled into our driveway, then reversed out, pulled into our neighbour's driveway and started taking photos of our house. Now, it was 1 a.m, so I phoned the police and they said, oh, there was an incident outside your house. They just want to get photographs of who's got cameras so they can kind of ask for it. And I kind of bought it, but you didn't buy it, do you?
I don't buy it.
He doesn't buy it.
Why are they hiding around the corner?
Yeah, why were they hiding around the corner? Yeah. Do you ever... So how do you wrestle with realism and what are kind of fringe ideas that you are fully convinced yourself that is true, and this is actually how the world works, with trying to communicate this with the normal world? Because that's where I struggle. If I try and talk to, say, my family, they think I'm a nutter. And I'm like, no, you're just in the Matrix. You're not seeing what's happening. So I'm 100% convinced I'm seeing the world more realistically now. I'm starting to understand it a bit more, be more pragmatic about it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm in a minority, and when I try and talk to people about it, I think I come across as a nutter.
Right. Okay.
Do you understand the dilemma?
Yes.
I'm dealing with it.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I do. I mean, I think one of the troubling things that you quickly get into is that the mass in every age, by which I mean most people, are kind of happy there. They don't want to ask these questions. They don't want to really understand how things work, really. And I mean, when it comes to this, when it comes to to elite theory and the stuff I talk about in Populist Delusion, most people, if you're just having a pint with them or whatever, will be happy to say, oh, well, yeah, the two parties are the same. You know, two cheeks of the same arse. You know, people say these sorts of things all the sort of time.
Michael Malice did it. Do you know Michael?
Yeah,
he was
here.
He was
a few years ago. Yeah,
right. He was here a few weeks ago, and he said once you see it, it's just two rival gangs competing for control of the country, something like that, wasn't it? Kind of like he said, it becomes a lot easier to understand it.
And so people are kind of happy to go along with that. But then, if you really mean it, I really mean it. They're the same. Like, no matter who you vote for. It can be Nigel, it can be Ed Davey, it can be Rishi Sunak, or I forget who's the Tory leader. Kemi Badenoch.
Yeah,
sorry,
Kemi.
I forget.
Soon to be generic.
Yeah, I mean, whoever it is in this country, you're still getting Tony Blair. I mean, let's face it. The permanent managerial state that has been set up in the country, you're going to get Tony Blair. And in the case of this government, it's quite literally Tony Blair and his institute, who has been talking about digital ID for 20 years, and now we're getting digital ID.
And Cameron was very much Tony Blair.
And Cameron was basically another version of Tony Blair. So, I mean, I've said so many times, the system was at its happiest in 2010, when it was Gordon Brown, Nick Clegg, and Cameron. I agree with Nick. And it's always trying to get back there to three different flavors of the same thing. But the system is clever enough that it doesn't, you can put different faces on it. You can paint it in different ways. So if it has to come with a populist face, so be it. And they'll bring it, they'll still do the things they want to do under a different lick of paint. I mean, you mentioned Larry Ellison earlier on. He's the number one funder of Tony Blair.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He is also a very big funder of Donald Trump. He gave the speech on the day of the inauguration. He is the owner of Oracle. He has a vested interest in digital ID and in this. I mean, you talk about Matrix, the control grid, the digital control grid they want to make. He's just bought TikTok. Okay, he is openly talking. He has talked again and again about what he wants to do.
They just put 100 million into OpenAI.
Right. Now, if they want to justify it in a left-wing way, oh, we need this technology to keep out the far right, they'll do it that way. If they want to do it in a right-wing way, oh, we look at what happened to Charlie Kirk. We need to do. They
find an argument.
It doesn't really matter how you're going to sell it. They'll find a way to sell it. I mean, look at the digital ID. They bring it in to stop illegal immigration, they're telling us. Okay, that was the argument. But 5 years ago, it was something to do with COVID. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying is, these things are going to happen regardless of who's in power, regardless of who we vote for, because the system that we have is a kind of managerial bureaucracy with various different control grids on it. And it's like when we're talking about politics, culture war issues, this party or that party, it's just like the kind of froth on the top of your coffee. You're not getting to the actual structure, the power structure, or as they talk about in elite theory, the ruling class.
Is this the iron fist of the oligarchy?
This is the iron law of oligarchy.
Iron law, sorry.
And just to explain the iron law of oligarchy, somebody can get into politics and have all sorts of ideas about how they want to change the world.
Yeah.
It can be Donald Trump, who had all sorts of ideas that he'd be talking about for many, many years, or it can be the AOC, who is a well-known Democrat, came in bright, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, but the system, over time, just to allow you into power, force you to make lots of different compromises until in the end, it doesn't really matter what you'll say, you still end up doing what would have been done anyway.
Maintaining the system.
And maintaining the system.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the case of America, where they have very powerful lobby groups, literally in some cases, voting the way they want on certain things. And when it comes to the AOC, as she's Cortez, she came in guns blazing, saying, she was going to be this radical, so on. It's been amazing to watch her get disciplined and ground down, kind of just turn into a little mini Nancy Pelosi, and now she dutifully just votes the same way as the rest of the Democrats, even on things that she's meant to disagree with, like, funding Israel, as an example.
Did you see? Do you know Adam Friedman?
I've heard of him. Yeah.
So I'll send it to you after this. He did an interview with Richie Torres, and he was talking. And Adam Friedman's a Jewish guy. He was talking about what's happening in Palestine. He was just saying, "Look, it's just as a human, it seems pretty bad." And Richie Torres is defending it, and then he basically got to the roots of it and said, "So you just support this because you took money off lobbyists?" And he got to the root of that. And so that makes me think, is the nature of this organic by virtue of how economics of big business work? Rich people get rich, they want to be even richer. Maybe they become a bit more narcissistic and think they should be shaping the world like Bill Gates does. So are they trying to shape the world by being rich, and are they trying to shape the world around their own wealth? And that's why I think perhaps this is why it is organic, but it's organic coming from the money. Right. Rather than a group of people in a room, smoky room, lizard people saying, we need to control the people here, there. It's more about maintaining a system that benefits rich people.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that a lot of the things that our governments do have a habit of then benefiting the same cadre of billionaires, as an example.
Yeah.
Especially ones who own big tech companies at the moment. But it's a little bit more complicated, because you then have to look at how that money is used and how it's administered. And this is what James Burnham was talking about with the managerial revolution.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the classic idea is the old fat cat tycoon, the industrialist who's independently wealthy, and then spends his money on the Henry Ford, say.
I was thinking Maxwell.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking like a kind of an old-fashioned, like 19th century industrialist type thing, or someone like Henry Ford. But if you have a look at a lot of the very rich people now, or the very powerful people now, and look at how their money is actually managed and administered, to some extent, there's a severance of ownership and control. Very good example is BlackRock. BlackRock has something like $10 trillion in assets. Everybody knows Larry Fink is the CEO. But that $10 trillion is not owned by Larry Fink. It is owned by millions of people who are part of pension funds and hedge funds and various other things, independently wealthy people. I even found out my own pension is managed by BlackRock the other day. I didn't even know that. I was reading the letter. I was like, I don't remember signing up to this. But even my money is somewhere there being managed by BlackRock. So the money, the ownership is dispersed, but the management of it is controlled, right? So you think, well, this is a kind of difference from like classic Marxism, where we have to look at ownership of the means of production, and this is who controls society, and then look at how that money is managed. Okay, this is where a figure like Tony Blair is interesting, because when people like Bill Gates and Larry Ellison say, "Oh, we're giving lots of our money to charity," what's the charity then? Oh, there's the Tony Blair Institute. Or okay, all right, that's interesting. Well, who are the other charities? And then you look at all of the other charities, and they're all affiliate partners of the Tony Blair Institute. There's a huge network of these NGOs. Those NGOs or think tanks or institutes, etc., then are tasked with helping to administer. So in one respect, these very rich people are furthering their agenda by funneling it into these sorts of things. But in another way, the NGO network kind of has a life of its own. And I mean, this is why I mentioned Henry Ford. Henry Ford set up something called the Ford Foundation. And after he died, the Ford Foundation became probably like the number one funder of left-wing causes, social liberalism, LGBT. I mean, you name it. The Ford Foundation's got its arms in there. Elon Musk actually did everybody a favor remember when he showed everybody where USA goes and all these different foundations that were there. Well, I mean, that Ford Foundation is so far away from actual real life Henry Ford. I mean, if you know anything about real life Henry Ford, he was not a liberal. He was a social conservative who had his own ideas about things, but that's not how his fortune was spent after he died. So even now, even where you have these billionaires, the way the money trickles around and the way the money is spent is not. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a kind of severance between ownership and control. So the managers, if you want to put it that way, are quite good at finding these pots of money that they can then do lots of things with or push lots of agendas with. And in a strange way, sometimes even the billionaires themselves can find themselves at odds with things that they, as a class, have funded, if that makes any sense. So
what was that? Kind of bringing it back up? So Ellison pledged to donate 95% of his wealth as part of the Giving Pledge in 2010. Since then, he's distanced himself from traditional non-profits and says he's opted to give away wealth on his own terms. He founded the Ellison Institute of Technology, a for-profit philanthropic organization at the University of Oxford. Okay. Thanks, Larry.
We have been seeing something interesting, though, in the past 5-10 years, I would say, which is, so that's the way things were going, right? With this money going into foundations and kind of being lost in this network of NGOs that has a kind of life of its own, and actually an enormous amount of power in driving government policy and what we would call globalization and decisions being taken outside of the normal channels of democracy. I guess we'll put it that way. I would say in the past 5 years, 10 years, we've seen the return of like the big capital B billionaire, Elon Musk, probably the most emblematic example, who are trying to find these pockets of these ways of asserting their own power, seeing how much they can get done as independently wealthy guys. Larry Ellison, probably another good example. What's interesting there is then tracking to see how far they can get, how much space can they carve out for themselves? Well, this is still happening, so who knows?
Yeah, it is interesting that a lot of this wealth has gone towards more left-wing ideas. Is that because it supports the idea, like supports the globalist agenda, and the globalist agenda is very good for the richest people to become richer?
Yeah, possibly. If you think about, liberal values, they're all things that promote consumerism, get people, and the old libertarian line was that, money doesn't care what color you are, money doesn't care, it's all the same sort of green, right? So, to an extent, you could say they push things that are beneficial, are going to keep people in this kind of neoliberal system that we have, keep it going.
Buy your iPhone, buy your Starbucks.
Yeah, get excited for the next Nintendo Switch thing coming out, etc.
Sit at home, order your Deliveroo. We've got the drivers coming across.
Exactly. Well, I would say though, and again we can come back to Larry Ellison. One of the major fissure points, I guess, or problems that has come is that in the middle of all of this globalizing world, you have Israel, who basically want to make a new empire in the Middle East, and a lot of these wealthy individuals also support Israel. And when it comes to Ellison, he's also the number one funder of the IDF. This has come out in recent days.
Can you find that, Con?
Bill Ackman is another.
Yeah, we know Bill Ackman.
Is another one. We talked about Tommy. There's this chap Shillman who's been in the press all week, who's a major backer of Tommy, as an example. So it's a little bit difficult to talk about liberal values and globalism and so on if at the same time you have this pretty hardcore, some might say even colonial project happening there that we're all meant to get behind, which basically goes against or is at odds with the values they've been pushing in the West. When I say they, I mean our governments, these left-wing NGOs, etc. All of the values that we were meant to hold sacred, basically you're thrown out when you start looking at that.
And that's why we've had these big Gaza protests.
Right. I mean, exactly. I mean, this is. I
mean, it's like, what do you expect people to do? When I see these complaints about these university students protesting for Gaza, I'm like, they're young people. They're seeing people being killed. What do you expect them to do?
And yeah, I mean, this is one of the great ironies in a way, which is that for the first time, right? So for 10 years, the left were backing all these nonsense woke things. Whether it was BLM or trans or whatever. I mean, these were things that were deeply unpopular with most people, that, were really stretching it. And actually, there was a huge backlash against those things for right, I would say. But now they've actually stumbled on something that's real.
Yeah.
That's actually happening. Like, people are the images are on the news every day. And now this is the moment where they're having all their funding pulled. This is the moment where
it's interesting because the Overton window has shifted quite significantly on Israel in the past few weeks. I mean, I think the trend's been happening, but do you want to bring that back up, Con? I just want to read that. This is interesting. So what's the title of the article? You scroll up a second. The report names 6 Jewish American billionaires quietly funding Israel's wars, occupying Palestine. A new report by the Jerusalem Post has identified 6 Jewish American billionaires who are quietly funding Israel's wartime and tech innovation, including the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Okay, so Jan Korm, Michael Dell, Bill Ackman, Mark Benioff, Larry Ellison, and Michael Bloomberg. I mean, this whole situation is becoming a problem and a mess.
Now, this is where we have to come back to what we were talking about earlier on with reform and even with Tommy, okay? People have had enough of lots of things that are happening in this country and in America. Mass immigration, woke stuff. People have had enough of a lot
Crime,
of
civil disobedience.
crime.
Yeah.
You know, these are real issues, okay? And so if you have a populist party, they're going to be popular because they're talking to actual concerns that people have got. My concern, increasingly, especially as I've looked at how Trump has been since he's come back in, Trump 2.0, is that these populist parties are almost like a kind of front for some other agenda. And when it comes to this issue, you can actually see it. So in the past week or so, couple of weeks, the UK recognised Palestine. Right, that happened. And so did Canada,
yeah.
France,
Yeah.
and Australia, I think.
Yeah.
Nigel Farage came out straight away and said, "Oh no, we're not going to do that." And I just seen just this morning, Richard Tice has been to Tel Aviv. Okay, so let's pretend.
Did he kiss the wall?
Let's just pretend that Reform get in, and then reverse that decision. Maybe that's what they're really there for. Do you understand what I mean? And all the rest of it is window dressing to get enough people to support them in order to have their hand on that lever. So this may be happening at the same time, and it's just I think at this moment it's just good for people to be aware of what's happening. Like
it's fine, Kurt.
Your anger is real, your concerns are real, but is the party that is being put in front of you real, or is it just sucking on those concerns almost like a vampire, and have they got some other thing they want to do? We actually saw an example from the other way when Boris Johnson was the Prime Minister. Boris Johnson posed as a populist before he came in, and then when he was in power,
didn't do shit.
I mean, well, he locked us down.
Yeah,
a dark cover of night brought in more immigrants than ever been seen before.
Had a few parties. By the way, this is the first time I've knocked a drink over in an interview, and I've done it twice in one thing. It's hilarious.
So all I'm saying is that's an example of it happening from the globalist side. When Boris became Prime Minister, he pretended to be a populist, but then he did very globalist things when he was actually in power. And you could say, well, with Trump or with Farage, and increasingly with the ones in Europe, what is their number one concern? And this is what I've talked about a lot, is that, in elite theory, they talk about political formula, top line. Okay, let's say your political formula is Christ is king, right? That's one political formula some people believe in. Christ is king. If you were a monarch back in the day, it was like Christ is king and I'm here as his representative on earth, divine right.
Yep.
That can't brook an and. Right, so I am the king representing God on earth, Henry VIII, brackets, and Thomas Cromwell. It doesn't work like that. Thomas Cromwell ends up going if he starts being a problem to that. Now, in the case of America, there are very, the political formula was meant to be America first. That can't brook an and either. It can't be America first and also this other country first. It has to just be America first. And this is, I guess, a concern that a lot of people rightly have at the moment. If your top line issue is actually that little country in the Middle East, that's what they care about. All the other things are tradable. That one is non-negotiable. And this is something that I've noticed again and again when I've looked at Trump, is that promises made to his base, whenever he does things that are really popular, it's a fudge. A judge knocks it down. It's not done properly. It's rushed. It's, an executive order that can easily be overturned. It's not voted. It's not done through Congress, right? I.e., it's something that can be undone. It's a symbolic victory to get through this next news cycle. Okay,
But these cycles are getting quicker now.
and these cycles, and Trump, I've said before, he's a time lord.
Yeah.
The news cycles move so quickly. The things that happen. I mean, the Charlie Kirk thing was only like 2 weeks ago. It feels like it was months ago. Like I made a video last week about Charlie Kirk, and it feels like it happened. That's how fast things happen in today's world. And with Trump, I mean, do you remember when he had the bust up with Zelensky? That feels like it happened years ago. It was only.
Well, he's now Team Ukraine, and
now he's Team Ukraine,
Yeah.
right? So what I'm saying is, with a lot of things that people actually care about, his base care about, it's always this. It's always this big symbolic thing in the moment, right? People love it. Do you remember Liberation Day? What happened to that?
But but going back to the point, I can make the argument that I can make the alternative argument that Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize. Trump wants to be somebody who brings peace. He's tried to bring Russia to the table. Putin isn't playing the game. He's getting attacked for that. So now he's gone from defensive to attack dog on Russia. That rather than somebody pulling strings in the background.
I mean, that would be more convincing if there was not. I mean, there's this guy called Brian Baletic who I watch sometimes. Don't know if you ever come across him. He's like a bald-headed chap. His channel's called New Atlas.
Oh yeah, no, I do.
Yeah, he makes this point a lot. He said, look, they wrote their plan down years ago in a document from the Rand Institute, which he goes and they follow it by the letter. They had a division of labor plan where Europe is going to take care of Europe's going to take care of Russia, where America pivots to look at China. Okay, so a lot of the rifts on Ukraine, let's say the rift between Trump and Keir Starmer as an example, according to Brian Baletic, is yet another Punch and Judy show, i.e. you're meant to kind of buy into all these narratives, but really the agenda stays exactly the same. The NATO plan for Ukraine, funding that, fighting the Russians and so on, doesn't change. It's just a way of selling it. Not only selling it to the American public, but selling it to the European public. Because remember, in the European market, Trump is a heel. Trump is disliked by most Europeans, apparently. Right? So
I'm not convinced of that anymore.
I'm not convinced of that anymore either. But this is the idea, right? So how do you get, your blue hair to really, really want to be Team Ukraine even more? Well, you convince them that Trump is really against Zelensky or something. But as we've seen, and this is what is really interesting to me, when people make predictions, you can then test them against what actually happens. And when it comes to this, Brian Baletic has been the only commentator who's consistently, correctly called what transpired, which is now, what were we, nine months in to Trump, and it's still basically the status quo.
Do we need to, for the listeners, do we need to plug any gaps on elite theory and define it?
We probably need to. Where I was going on the Trump thing is what you notice. Okay, so all those things for the base, it's a fudge.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to things specifically to do with Israel, or let's say speech codes and anti-Semitism or something like this, it's done to the letter. Those laws have every T crossed, every I dotted, completely funded properly. Okay, and I noticed this pattern a long time ago when Ron DeSantis passed something called the Stop Woke Act, right? And at the same time, he passed an anti-Semitism bill. The Stop Woke Act was woolly. It was had all sort, like a lawyer looking at it would be like, yeah, well, like you can argue every single one. But the anti-Semitism one, it was like, well, there's no ambiguity there. You absolutely know what it's kind of defined to the letter. And this is where I kind of worry sometimes whether a lot of the populism is a kind of smokescreen in front of some other agenda.
very important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin.
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with Casa.
Okay, so how do you then look at the blasphemy laws they're promoting here, which is really, they're not blasphemy laws, they're anti-Islam laws. How do you look at that now? Then what's, because it's almost like, from what you've said now and watching the Overton window shift on Israel, see what happened to Netanyahu in the UN, I'm wondering what thing is now going to happen in the next couple of weeks that's going to shift it back to being pro-Israel. It feels like there's going to be a thing.
Well, you see, this is where I genuinely think that there is a split in the elite between.
Okay.
Here's where it gets problematic for us.
Yeah.
I don't think either of them like us that much. Right? It doesn't. It's not like neither of these sides are necessarily on your side, but I do think they have genuinely rival interests. Okay, whereas one set of interests are they want to make Israel an exception.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we can fill in some of these elite theory gaps, but the idea is that whoever is sovereign can make an exception, right? There's a normal set of rules, but then those rules can be broken at any time by the sovereign. You can make some unprincipled exception for that, because reasons. And there's one of these sides who want Israel to be that exception. I.e., okay, we've got this globalist world. We all, it's this rainbow world where it's we're getting our Deliveroos and
watching on Netflix.
Watching on Netflix, and I don't really mind what goes on in your bedroom, and it doesn't. All the races of the world get on, etc. Okay.
Have you seen the camera on the new iPhone?
We all live in that world,
yeah.
Okay, and have equality and all of the usual things. But there's an exception for this one state that gets to be, well, as you've been seeing. Okay, that's one side. On the other side, there is what I would call true globalists, people who, I mean, classically you'd think of your Klaus Schwab or your World Economic Forums. And I actually think like Larry Fink and to an extent Ellison, who we talked about, some people have a foot in both camps, but really if you have a look at his agenda, it's really towards globalism. Tony Blair, who I've said, again, he's there in Gaza now, but he's a globalist, right?
Yeah.
And so these people, they want to build up the power of the UN. They want transnational institutions, international law, all of these kind of
bollocks.
Bollocks. All of this stuff. But they want a kind of control grid world where we're all, into these permanent transnational structures where there's, a set of rules that we all have to follow.
Yeah.
So you can see how the Israel thing at the moment is a problem for that globalist world, and how, let's say, you wanted to weaken the power of the UN, or you wanted to, get into a mindset where people no longer have a problem with what's happening there. Okay, you could then start to chip away at these things that, as you rightly said, many of them are bollocks, right? But it's a different. You can see how if it's a different agenda. So that's what I think is happening at the moment. That you have these two powerful factions that are going at it, and in a way, this may not be that bad for the rest of us, because James Burnham said the best that we can hope for us little people who aren't part of the ruling class, who aren't mega billionaires and so on. If you have powerful elite factions going at each other in a strange way, it opens up little gaps, little bits of freedom in the gaps, right? You don't want to be caught in the crossfires, right? While it's going on, but it can open up these little pockets of freedom. So you could say, well, if you think about it, we're having freer and opener conversations today than we would have been 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Elon Musk, regardless of who he's working for now or what his agenda is, the fact that he's bought X does mean that we have a little bit more freedom. The fact that these two factions are going at it means that me and you can have this conversation. I think. I think. See you in a jail cell.
Yeah, see who follows us home. Haven't been arrested yet.
But you know what I mean. So he calls it managing the. If the managers are busy managing each other, they've got less time to think about managing you. And so this may actually be not a bad scenario at the minute, where there's this kind of quiet civil war going on between different elite factions. But that doesn't mean that you should necessarily get into bed and be the useful idiot for either one of these sides, I would say.
Is there a risk of connecting dots that seem linked that aren't linked? How do you check yourself on this?
When you say connecting dots...
Well, so it's almost like you could look at any news event now and think, oh, that's because of this faction's doing this or that faction's doing this, and sometimes it is just organic.
Oh, right, okay. Well, yeah, I would say... I have always been against something called capital C conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
Where, nothing really happens or something like this, or there's a hidden hand behind all of the events that happen. I've never been one for that. Usually it's very visible what's happening.
Right.
Because as against conspiracy theory, real power, wants to be seen. What I mean by that is it can't help but show itself. It can't help but be seen. Do you understand what I'm saying? Right.
Do, yeah.
So at the moment we're seeing Netanyahu everywhere, right? He's coming out.
So I'm doing podcasts.
He's defending himself against all sorts of accusations and so on, right? But it's not like you don't have to draw to that many dots. They're literally, he's literally telling you, yes, we've just bought TikTok. Yes, I am talking to influencers because I want them to push our message.
Israel just bought ExpressVPN, an Israeli company. 8 VPNs are now owned by Israeli companies.
Yeah, well, I did say that may have happened a while back, I think. But yeah, what I'm saying is often you don't have to look that far because it's pretty obvious. One of the things I've done, one of the people I've been especially interested in is Tony Blair, who I mentioned a few times.
Yeah,
he has his fingers in an awful lot of pies, right? And I often marvel at just how he can be in all these places at once. But his institute, when I first started talking about this, Tony Blair, 5-6 years ago, people used to ask me this all the time. Used to be like, "Oh, are you sure he's got that much power? Are you sure you're not just seeing this? Is this?" Now it's mainstream. Now basically every single newspaper, every single day is saying, hold on a second, is Tony Blair really running the country? Or how is everything that he wants to happen then ends up happening in 4 or 5 months? Okay, so and this is not this is pretty much every newspaper now, left and right. There was an amazing bit on the Tony Blair Institute in the New Statesman just a couple of weeks back.
What was it saying?
Well, it was saying what's it like inside there. What are they up to? Why are they running the government? So what I'm saying is this stuff is out in the open, and it's not like you have to dive down that many rabbit holes to draw these lines, because they're just there. They tell you it to your face. And I mean, maybe it wasn't always like that, but in the current moment, it's just naked and out in the open.
So we're living in the world architected by Tony Blair.
Well, I don't know about the world, certainly the country. I don't know about the world. There must be some limit to his power, but in this country, it seems like, I mean, what happens is that his institute writes a lot of policy papers, proposals. Politicians are lazy, and when they need to have a solution to something, they're like, well, who's got all the different think tanks go? And Blair's like, well, look, here's the plan. I've already got it. You can get it off the shelf as a service. Policy as a service, right? And it's there, ready to go. Because he's already thought about it, and he's been thinking about it and he's got all the contact, and he's got them all in place. And I watched it happen numerous times during the Tory government. It was the Tory government, but it was still, they were getting the ideas from Tony Blair, and you can even see it. They publish it, let's say, in January, and it's government policy by September. I mean, in the case of digital ID, it couldn't be more blatant.
Oh, well, this is the most obvious one.
That's the most obvious one.
It's the most obvious one.
It's not just that. It's like, I mean, during COVID, he was in charge of administering the COVID rollout, not just for Britain, but like half of Africa.
This talk of him administering, being the administrator for a Palestinian government in, I don't know, is it meant to be Gaza and the West Bank? I've got no idea.
It's just Gaza, I think.
Yeah, feels very suspicious.
It's, yeah.
So are you highly suspicious about what happened on October the 7th in that the most surveilled part of the world, which has a ring still around it?
See, this is where I don't get into actual conspiracy.
Yeah.
I just look at what I try to look at is power players, their agendas, and then try to see what happened, rather than trying to get into some of these questions of...
Well, this is where I saw the alignment with Curtis Yarvin, because I was away in the States, and one of my friends recommended, said, watch the interview with Curtis Yarvin in the New York Times. So I did. Then I watched this Tucker Carlson one, and then I listened to about 8 in 24 hours. But he talked about politics, like debating politics is a waste of time. It's all power.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It's all power. And so then I was like, so what am I doing with my life? Like... caring, being involved. So let's plug these gaps on elite theory, just so anyone listening just knows fully what you mean when you talk about elite theory.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to like edit this and put it at the start.
No, it's fine.
So elite theory, there was a set of thinkers in the late 19th century, early 20th century. One of them was an Italian called Giancarlo Mosca. Another one was Vilfredo Pareto, who was also a famous economist. Yeah, I think he was Swiss, but he was also Italian as well. It's like Swiss-Italian.
The 80-20 guy.
Yeah, the 80-20. You've heard him from the 80-20, but he also wrote this massive book on sociology called The Mind of Society. And then they had a kind of protege between them called Robert Michels, who was German-Italian, who also wrote... So these three are what they call the classical elite theorists. And really what they were interested in was updating Machiavelli. You'd have heard of Nicola.
Yep.
So Machiavelli, he wanted to analyze power and politics and talk about the world as it really is, not as it ought to be, i.e. stripped of all ideology, stripped of all idealism, just what is. And if you remember the book The Prince, it's very controversial because at that time, there was a genre known as the Mirror for Princes, where various people would give advice to kings, and the advice would be along the lines of, well, the most important thing, of course, is to be morally good, to be a good Christian, and things like that. And Machiavelli comes along and he says, look, what if you were a king and you just lived up to the ideals of being a good Christian, you'd end up just being a dead king. If you actually want to be a good king, you need to be ruthless, you need to be cunning, you need to play the game, you need to consider how power actually works, and the rest is, what people think of as Machiavelli. Incidentally, he wrote another book called The Discourses on Livy, where he basically comes out in defense of the Republic. He says the Republic is a better way of government than the single monarch, the single prince. And some people say, well, okay, because of that, the prince was just a satire or something. But actually, if you read Machiavelli properly, he's just as cynical, just as interested in power as it really works in the discourses as he is in the prince. So, he's the same in both books. But what these elite theorists sought to do was to update Machiavelli for now with more historical examples, with more data, and to try to make that into a kind of science, into like a political science. And so Mosca, he, in his book, The Ruling Class, looks at lots of different historical examples, and he says, every society ever, regardless of what it calls itself, whether it's a dictatorship or a monarchy or a republic or a democracy, is, you can see there's a ruling class and then there's the mass of the ruled. So you have the rulers and the ruled, the organized minority and the disorganized mass. Now, this sounds like a very straightforward observation, but then if you really, so lots of people would say, yeah, well, that's obvious, right? But then when you really start taking that seriously, you end up with the kind of conversation that we've just been having for the past hour, okay? The organized minority against the disorganized mass. So that's the basic idea of Mosca.
Right.
Then you have Pareto, who basically has a very similar idea, but he talks about how is it that you get a circulation of elites? How do you go from a situation where you have one ruling class to a different ruling class? And he has quite a long and complicated answer to that question. He says there are different types of elites. You can have foxes who rule by cunning and persuasion and perception management, and you can have lions who rule by force. All our lives, we have been ruled by foxes. Our elites are foxes.
Right.
When Trump came in, it seemed that Trump might be a lion, or he's certainly closer to being a lion than a fox, which is why it was such a jolt. But still, I would argue that we're, broadly speaking, the West is ruled by foxes. And in a way, the fox fears the lion. The fox dislikes the strongman leader, and all of the enemies of the West, whether it was Stalin or Hitler or Saddam Hussein, or you name it. Think of any regime that,
or even now Putin and Xi Jinping,
or Putin or Xi. These are lion-style leaders. It despises the lion. So what Pareto argues is that if foxes go too far, they'll start weakening the system to the extent where the lion needs to come again. This is where you get the circulation of elites.
Hold on, this is feels like this is in line with what I was listening to Curtis Yarvin talk about, where he's been saying kind of democracy doesn't work. It allows bad ideas to happen. And, we should get over our aversion to dictators, and perhaps America needs a more monarch type, and America needs to build an empire now. I think to most normal people that sounds absolutely fucking crazy, but that sounds like it's in line with what you're talking about.
Well, this would be this would be, as Pareto would call, a lion-style leadership. The truth is, once you understand elite theory, every system is basically the same, regardless of what it calls itself.
Right.
Okay. Now, you can get harder managerial regimes and softer ones. Okay. I would say that our system is a kind of soft dictatorship.
Yeah.
It's still a dictatorship, right? And who is the dictator is somewhat hidden and diffuse. Okay. This was most visible during Joe Biden's presidency? Was Joe Biden really in charge of America?
I saw a great tweet that said, if the government can be ran by a guy with dementia, do we need a government at all?
or now, like
Yeah.
Starmer, does anybody really believe that he is the final guy who makes all the decisions in the country? So, but yet still, people recognize that our system right now in Britain has totalitarian elements, right? There's got elements that we recognize as being a little bit dictatorial.
So it's a totalitarian system with a rotating dictator.
Or where the dictator is just not even visible.
Right.
Whereas if you could say something about Putin's Russia, at least he's in charge.
Yeah.
He's the actual, he is the actual final decision maker. Okay. So all I would say is that system is just a little bit more honest about itself. Whereas in ours, they like to put a lot more smoke and mirrors in front of it.
Obfuscate it. Yeah.
But really, the actual mechanisms of power don't really change, even if you change the label. So, and this is where, as we carry on going through the thinkers. So, Robert Michel's talked about the iron law of oligarchy.
Yeah.
So that is basically what we were talking about earlier on, where it takes you so long to get a party up and running, that by the time you're actually in power, it's been watered down sufficiently that you've actually become part of the system.
Reform,
or I mean, a pretty good example is Le Pen.
Yeah.
Right. And I know, funny enough, Le Pen has actually been banned, hasn't she, or something?
Yeah.
As things stand. But that party has been around long enough now that it's had a lot of the jagged edges kind of shaved off. You know, if you compare Le Pen to her dad, for example.
But is there an argument that they have to become popular enough to win enough of the vote, they have to water themselves down to appeal to a wide enough group of people? See, this is where I make the counter argument.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can make that argument. Make that argument.
You naive little boy.
But I mean, there's more to it than simply the policy positions.
Yeah.
Okay. It's about technical specialists that they have to get on board, PR people, managers of various kinds. And once they're up and running and it's like a slick professional operation, they've basically already kind of just become just another party. If that makes sense. So there's a way in which the system is very good at just transforming things into another flavor of itself.
To keep it going.
But then some of the other thinkers I look at in Populist Delusion show what I'm saying about every system in the end being what you might call absolutist or some form of totalitarianism. Power is always, in the final analysis, what they call decisionist. Decisionism being somebody has to make a call, and it has to be an executive decision made by somebody that cuts across the normal order of things. Okay, and you can always see this in action whenever there's an emergency.
We have a lot of those recently.
Okay, so like during COVID, for example, all of the normal order of things was swept out the window. All the normal protocols, your rights, blah, 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 just swept out the window. We're doing this. There's an exception. And so that decision was made. Or in America, the executive orders that the president has, he just kind of decrees it through executive order. They can make certain decisions through by emergency decree. And one of the things that I was shocked by when I was looking into this, and I talk about in Populist Delusion, is that certain emergencies have been on the books in America literally since World War I. There's an emergency decree that was set up by Woodrow Wilson in 1917, still on the books, still live. And then, so...
You don't get your liberties back.
Right. I mean, or you could think about other things like the Patriot Act,
Yeah.
various other things like that. But the point is that real power has to function. This is to go back to what you're talking about with Curtis Yarvin, almost like a monarch, almost like I mean, you talked about Vince McMahon earlier on. Back in the day in pro wrestling, there was the WWF, right? But there was also
WWE,
right? There was the NWA.
Oh, I thought
Right, there was the National Wrestling Alliance, which had a committee of all different promoters from around the country, and they had a cartel basically where if you were running Memphis, right, and another dude was running Texas, you wouldn't run shows in Texas, and I wouldn't run. So they had an agreement not to run against each other, and also if you were the NWA promoter in Memphis, say, nobody else could run a wrestling show in that town. Okay, it was old-fashioned cartel. But they had a committee that had to make decisions on like who books the world champion and things like that. Vince McMahon, basically the dictator of WWF, he got to make all the decisions. Okay, and they could have been teams, they could have been writing teams and so on. And very often Vince would say, no, scrap that, we're doing it this way. We're going to do that. We're going to do this. He was basically a dictator. And if you have a look at those two models, well, you hadn't even heard of the NWA, you've heard of WWE, it's because that method of decision making is the one that won out. And the rule by committee, all the different rules and regulations and so on, that didn't win out because they weren't able to agree on anything. They were trying to. So
that's the same as my home and every business I run.
Right. So almost every business has to have a final arbiter, but also somebody who can come in and say, like, look, it doesn't matter what we usually do. We have to do this now. This is what they call decisionism. And I guess what Curtis Yarvin wants is somebody who can cut through all of the systems of checks and balances in bureaucracy that's built up over the years in the managerial state. Now it's come to a point where if Donald Trump tries to do all sorts of things, as we talked about, it gets struck down by a judge or he can't get it through or there's red tape or so. It needs somebody to cut through it all. That's what he wants.
J.D. Vance. Maybe. Can you, does being a realist make you a pessimist?
I mean, it doesn't have to, but it does mean that you tend to be a little bit less hopeful. What I found in many years of looking at this now is that people have got a bias towards wanting the big savior to come.
Yes, of course.
People know things are shit and they want a hero to trust in. And I mean, we're talking about Yarvin. One of Yarvin's favorite writers is Thomas Carlyle, one of my favorite writers also. He wrote a book called On Heroes and Hero Worship, which is worth a look. So this is something that a lot of people want. They want a big, great man to come. Caesar or somebody like this, right? Or Napoleon or Mussolini or insert other strong men here throughout history. People do have a kind of gravitational pull towards this. But because of that, they want to believe that people are their guy, whether it's Elon Musk or Donald Trump or Nigel Farage or Tommy or anyone else, they want to believe that there's someone there, Conor McGregor in Ireland. Okay, they're looking for that strongman. And that hope, that kind of desire is a very strong thing to overcome for a lot of people. Like they want to be optimistic. Whereas me, looking at just coldly looking at the power as I often do, I often see a lot of these people are not going to be like the big savior is not going to come from this current configuration or from this set of characters. Yeah.
I want to talk to you about one of my sponsors, Incogni. And that means we're going to talk about the weird world of spam. And I don't just mean those spam emails that you get day after day from companies you never heard of and companies you've never signed up to. I'm also talking about those spam phone calls you get from those people who seem to know a little bit too much about you, trying to get your bank details. It's all a bit creepy, right? Now, this all comes from the world of data brokerage. There are companies out there collecting your data, building profiles, and sending that data to anyone who wants it, which is why when one of those scammers phones you up, they seem to know everything about you. Now, I've tried myself to get off these lists, try to get off the phone lists, try to get off the email lists. I unsubscribe from every one of these emails that comes in, but this game of whack-a-mole, it just never ends. And so this is where Incogni comes in. They do all the hard work for you. They reach out to these companies and they will get you legally removed from these lists. And I know because the last time they sponsored my show, I signed up and I didn't take the free option that they offered me. I wanted to pay for it. I wanted to see if you get value for money. And they removed me from 79 data broker lists. And so I've stayed on. I've stayed a subscriber and I have seen a massive decrease in the number of emails and phone calls I've been getting. So it's a great service. I recommend you check it out. If you're sick of this like I was, please head over to incogni.com/Peter and sign up. If you use the code Peter, you will get a lovely 60% discount. So that's incogni.com/Peter. So I said to you, this might become a therapy session, but so I want to be optimistic. I mean, I think it's shit in the UK at the moment, and I love the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I love it. I love our football. I love our sense of humour. I love the countryside. But I am sad by many things. I was listening to a podcast of yours earlier where you were talking about photos from like the 50s and 60s and things look great. And you go to our high street now and they're dirty and they're vape shops. And you're right. We have been sold a dream that is not been a reality. Yes, we might have had some form of tech utopia, but the reality is, as our high streets are dead, there's a lot of crime and antisocial behaviour. I think there has been a feminism lie where, yeah, it's been great. Some women have had some incredible careers. It's great they have choices. Have a daughter. But I actually talked to my daughter a lot. I talked to her about it the other day. You know, I said, you know, you probably want to be meeting the guy you want to settle down with and have kids with your mid to late 20s because otherwise it's going to get harder. But I think we spend a lot of time to convince ourselves that things are better and they're not. And I mentioned this to Connor on the way because we watched a film, what was it called, mid-90s? He watched this film mid-90s. It's coming of age film. It's before the mobile phones. It was right in my era of skateboard. You know, we'd meet on a Saturday, all our friends would get our skateboards, we'd go skateboarding all day and hang out, smoke a joint and go home. And it was brilliant. Honestly, it was probably one of the best periods of my life. Yeah, this one here. And I remember it.
Jonah Hill directed it.
Yeah, Jonah Hill. Do you remember what you said to me?
Just say I've got a lot of envy for that childhood when it felt like there was a lot less problems in the world for kids. They just went out and caused havoc and there was no consequences, really.
Well, news was 6 o'clock. That's when you didn't disturb Dad because he was watching the news at 6. And that was it. We weren't all part of the political cycle like we are now, which is this 24-hour news bullshit. And that was life. And it was great. There was no mobile phones. There was no social media. We just hung out and it was cool. And like you said, back in the 50s, everything looked beautiful and nice. And it's all just a bit crap now. And I don't even see how we get back there. Actually, I see it getting much worse. And I see we've had this. I mean, you talked about it. You talked about, I think it was during the Blair era, sending loads of people to university who shouldn't have gone to university. It's actually the real problem with that's right now because people go to university and they can't get jobs. A lot of people go to university can't get jobs. And AI is wiping jobs out. And I'm just looking going,
this.
Yeah, it is. It's that. It's WALL-E or it's Ready Player One. And I'm just like, oh, God. Am I, by making this podcast, I talk to people I'm really interested in, but I'm also hopeful it makes the world a bit better place. And I'm getting a little bit involved in local politics. And I've got an interest in national politics. And I'm thinking, I'm 47 next month. Plenty of people die at 48 with a heart attack. Maybe I'll get to 70. Maybe even if I lived old, I've got 10, 15 good years of playing tennis and hanging out. Like, am I just wasting my fucking time with this shit? And are we all wasting our time arguing on Facebook about stupid shit? Like, is it all just a waste of time and I should just travel the world, read books and drink nice coffee? Do you understand where I'm at?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you should do all those things. I love a flat white, as people know as well. Yeah, and I think you have to have those things in your life that give your life meaning, right? For lack of a better term. I'm not saying that flat white will give you meaning, but having hobbies and having other interests and other stuff that you do, and coming to peace with the fact that there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of things in this world that are outside of the remit of your control. As interesting as it is to study and talk about, and as shit as the country is at the moment, there is a limit to what any single person can do. So for your own well-being and mental health, you have to have a good balance. Otherwise, this stuff will drive you crazy. It absolutely will.
My counterpoint to that, though, is that if I don't vote, it doesn't change the election. But if there's mass apathy, it can change the results. So if we all become nihilistic and just don't care, do we get forced into a worse world? And is it the collective knowledge and experience and actions from us all that actually change things? So by being nihilistic and withdrawing, am I one small part of that cog that can go into a worse?
I mean,
this is what I'm wrestling with.
I mean, what I would say is I wouldn't stop. I mean, I wouldn't stop talking. I mean, obviously, I don't stop talking about these things. But you have to have a balance, because if you just go all in, I mean, they're to a certain extent, the Facebook conversation, the Twitter conversation, arguing about this or that, whatever the current thing is, Charlie Kirk, whatever, does beyond a certain level become what they call a hyper reality. And I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, but he wrote this extraordinary piece, which was published in all the papers. You know, don't condone anything that he did, obviously.
The manifesto,
right? But if you read it, he talks in there about surrogate activities that back when we were living in villages, right? Life was small enough so that individuals could feel like they make a difference to their actual community. They were actually involved in the decision-making in their own community. But now, because of mass and scale, because of the sheer size of governments, and if you get, how big America is, I mean, millions of people are quite far removed from being able to make a real difference on that sort of scale. So we seek instead surrogate activities. And increasingly, I think that online kind of politics, hashtag activism, Twitter, Facebook, has strangely become its own containment mechanism. Let me put it a different way.
Yeah, I get it.
If everybody's always just talking about whatever's trending on Twitter, what they're not doing is organizing politically in the real. They're not really engaged in something real that's going to change anything. They're just kind of, it's just another, it becomes its own, like another watching Netflix, if you want, only you're talking about politics on social media, with the difference that you feel like you made a difference. Now I've made my tweet and it's got 12,000 likes. I've made a difference. But of course, you haven't made a difference. Doesn't mean, but I mean, Keir Starmer is ratioed every single day.
Yes.
Every tweet he makes, he's ratioed. But he's still bringing in digital ID.
Yeah.
And he doesn't care. I guess what I'm saying is people have to be aware of the limits of what online activity can do as well. And getting involved in actual politics at the local level can be quite boring. It's like council meetings and, they're going to do the bins and all that sort of stuff. And in my experience, people don't really like. That's not exciting. It's not much less exciting than talking about whatever's trending on Twitter.
It has given me a bit of a like it's extended my sympathy to the left a little bit, in that I would traditionally consider myself small c conservative. I mentioned to you before we started, I've become a little bit more libertarian. I just dislike big government. But at the same time, if I'm defending libertarian ideas, I'm defending a billionaire class. And I'm perhaps defending therefore the elite class, and maybe am I a tool for defending that, which we know is a group of people who got fabulously richer during COVID and since COVID. And we do have, this is why I got into Bitcoin, because we have this financial system that seems to be architected perfectly to continually create serfs who work for the state, which funnels money to the richest in society. And so then I do have these sympathies, but I'm like, well, I'm not a Marxist. So I get really confused with it all. And I'm like, well, what the fuck what am I meant to think? What am I meant to do? I don't want to do someone's bidding.
Well, I mean, this is a thing, right? Like, let's say you've paid for a service, though. Let's say you've given X amount of your own money for something.
Yes.
Is that thing that you've paid for, are you working for it? Are you using it, or is it using you? And what I'd say in many of these cases is that there's a kind of strange mindset that a lot of people have found themselves in, that these people that you are using, let's say the Trump administration, or you're using Elon Musk, or you're using whoever it is to get what you want. And I would say that the directionality is often the wrong, like, no, they're going to use you to get what they want rather than vice versa. It's a very simple thing, but it's like, well, so that's all I would say when it comes to that. Yeah, I mean, I found myself, as time has gone on, well, it's sympathetic to the left, maybe putting it strong, but I've certainly found myself kind of pulled back towards some of these basic questions around capitalism and things like that recently. I wrote a follow-up to Populist Delusion, which is called The Prophets of Doom, which talks about progress, the idea of social capital P progress, and basically says, well, I don't know, like exactly as we were talking about, doesn't feel like progress. You know, you'd go back to the 90s. I go back to the 90s in a heartbeat. I've said it many times. And then we look at, you know, stuff from the 50s and the 60s, and we think, well, this was a kind of life that we were denied, you know, real communities and so on and so forth. And one of the things I've often thought about is that this is a very difficult conclusion to reach, but do a lot of people, so we're used to thinking of, well, at least we're not like medieval peasants. At least we've moved beyond all of that.
But have we?
I guess my real question is, are people actually happiest in that mode where they're living in a little village, where they have a purpose, where they have a place, where they have community, as opposed to the current era where people don't know their own neighbors, where people are atomized, where people are wedded to their mobile phones. Nobody knows anybody. You don't have any stake even in, you know, I mean, I know you're trying to do stuff in your local community, but most people are kind of set adrift. So I mean, coming back to Carlyle and some of the other things we've been talking about, I do wonder if there's something missing in the kind of dream that we've been sold since Thatcher and Reagan and all of the other governments that we've had, the double liberalism of Clinton and Blair. Something seems to be missing from current modern life.
I went out to Malawi about a year and a half ago, and it's one of the 10 poorest countries in the world. And I was chatting to a guy there, and he said, I just want to be clear, we're impoverished here.
Mhm.
A lot of people are happy. We
Mm.
went out to a village, middle of nowhere. It's a very simple life. People seem fairly happy.
Mhm.
And what we have here in the UK is a lot of people who are actually living in poverty, no hope of escaping it. Costs for everything are getting pretty extreme. And I think it's fair to say it's extreme.
Yeah.
Opportunities for youngsters seem to be disappearing. I can understand why some kids join gangs. Don't like it.
Mhm.
And I just wonder, like when you self-reflect, am I just playing this game and naturally the best way is to just stop playing? Put down the piece and go, I'm done. Are we in need of our own enlightenment? This dark, and perhaps
Mhm.
it's a dark enlightenment,
Mhm.
but like a realist enlightenment. Is this what we need as a nation? Because we're all fighting. Does everyone need to just be sat down and say, hold on a second, who's winning here? None of us are winning.
Mhm.
Like, none of us are winning. Well, I mean, some of us are, but like generally speaking, friends who've got two, like both, your husband and wife are both working, middle class jobs, got no money at the end of the month.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
like, what are we doing here?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I had the answers. I don't know. I mean, the best thing we can do is to kind of point out what we think is true, and
Go to jail.
well, hopefully not that, but
Is there historically been a better system, a way of doing things? Do you look to history at all? I mean, is it really that village time? And
well, I mean, I mean, maybe this is me being a romantic or whatever, but I often think about where, I mean, yeah, people were poorer, but they just seem to be happier, more content. They had I think people have a yearning for meaning and purpose. And a lot of people now, I mean, it's not just about having a job. I mean, I was listening to LBC this morning on the way here, and the government was talking about, 18 to 21-year-olds, we're going to make sure they work. What does that actually mean? Like, well, get them work in Tesco's or Sainsbury's. But that's not the sort of work that we think of in the old, it's not like doing something like a kind of blacksmith or a artisanal baker or something like this. There was a kind of, or even like being back down the mines. These sorts of jobs people had, how can I put it? Like they were proud of a kind of way of life. It wasn't just a job. It was a whole structure of things.
Well, as a kid, when they say, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's not a Tesco worker. It's not a barista at Costa.
So, and I think
you have hopes and dreams.
There's been this tendency for people just to talk about jobs in the abstract. But I do think the type of work, also, it's like conservatives especially think, well, any old job will do, But I'm less convinced that some of these like kind of service-based jobs are not going to get you back to the kind of sense of meaning and purpose I was talking about in the old village. The trouble is, in the interest of realism, I can't think of any times really where things have kind of moved back. That's not realistic either.
Yeah.
We're not going to get back. I don't know if we're going to get back to, I like to talk about Trumpton. You ever see that old show? The little, it's like a little old village where they had
Which was it?
Trumpton. Do you ever see it?
Oh,
It was
God.
yeah.
Yes.
So,
hold on. Wasn't that a village within a different show?
Well, I think it was like Camberwick Green,
Yeah.
Trumpton, and Quigley. I think it was. There was like three different ones, and it's different. I mean, this is the thing. In my darker moments, right, I looked at the plans for the 15-minute villages, right? That they were, that Klaus Schwab And I thought, if they weren't evil, right? If these people weren't evil, I can see that they're actually moving towards something that people might actually like. A 15-minute, fundamentally, if you take away the ideological aspect, what they're actually trying to recreate is something like that.
Mm.
Well, how do we do it in a way where it's not evil? And that's one of the biggest challenges at the moment, is that I have said before, what we really need is just a clear out of the entire ruling, like a true circulation of the current elites for a different set of people who have different ideas about the world. But this is where we are at the minute. That's a pipe dream.
Well, my friends I built up over the last 10 years will say that will come from the world of Bitcoin, because I don't know if you've looked at Bitcoin at all.
I'm aware of it. Yeah. I'm
okay.
aware of it, yeah.
I mean, just the basic thesis is that rather than having a monetary system controlled by these elites who can print as much as they want, distribute it to themselves, you kind of have a meritocracy of money, in that it's a restricted limit on how many there are, and that what you're doing is you're having as Bitcoin grows and fiat money dies, you've got a transition of power, because you've got a new set of people who own the assets. I think when there's a certain price when Bitcoin reaches, it's something like I'm guessing, but say it's $1 million per coin, that there are more Bitcoin millionaires than fiat millionaires. And they tend to have generally have a different worldview, more skeptical of the elites and more skeptical of government. And perhaps you can get that revolution there. I also have another one where I think I have this hopium with AIs, real hopium, that it's going to destroy these. Mm-hmm. These are going to become unusable because we don't know what we're talking to. So we're just going to have to get rid of these. And we go into this world of abundance where we actually get to sit back and think about what we want to be in the world. This is my hopium version, by the way, Neema. This is my hopium version.
Yeah.
But I do feel like in talking to you that we are approaching some form of enlightenment or need of an enlightenment.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of people feel that there needs to be a change.
Yeah.
The big test for the current system is, can it? This was the question that was asked of the Soviet Union when it needed to reform Gorbachev. And it couldn't.
It couldn't, no.
It collapsed in on itself. It couldn't do it. And, I mean, funny reform, right?
Yeah, I know.
This is the big question being asked of America, Britain, and the West in general, is can it? Are these systems now too big to actually be reformed in any real way?
Is Milei another example in Argentina? He's trying to do something different and can't, and now he's...
Well, I read this morning that he has to have a bailout. The biggest irony.
Yeah, I mean, he did also come out. I'll get the quote wrong, but he said you cannot rebuild a nation from the roof. You've got to start from. He said this stuff will take a long time, but I also wonder if what comes with that bailout. It's like, well,
and this is where it's kind of depressed. Like, there's one of the authors I talk about is called Bertrand de Juvenel. Right, he wrote a book called On Power. And one of the most depressing conclusions that he comes to is that with every revolution that takes place in history, what actually happens is that the new revolutionary power centralizes power more efficiently than the old one. So that the true meaning of the French Revolution was a more efficient centralization than the old Bourbon dynasty, right? So, I don't know if you look at the the communist revolution, a more efficient centralization than the old Tsars, or even Cromwell in this country, or Glorious Revolution, more efficient centralization than the old Stuarts and Tudors and so on and so forth. So this is one of the things that I mean. It can go another way, right? We could have a revolution. We could have a revolution that ends up centralizing things even further, or end up with a system that's even more dictatorial than the one we have now.
Well, if America starts empire building and maybe does do what Curtis Yarvin has said, that is going to be even more centralisation of power.
Exactly. Or if it's, I mean, some of the people he's friendly with, like Peter Thiel is another one of these billionaires, Palantir and so on,
yeah.
right? I mean, but these are systems of greater centralization and greater control. So the upshot, and this is a kind of way of understanding things that is counterintuitive. I read this guy called John Gray before, who used to be a libertarian, like in Thatcher era, but then he kind of turned on it. He wrote a book called False Dawn, among others.
I'm writing a lot of books down.
Yeah.
I also bought another book this morning because of you. Ride the Tiger, I think it was called.
Ride the Tiger, yeah, okay, yeah. But in this book, False Dawn, he says that the true meaning of Thatcher was actually a greater centralization of government control in this country, as against what he calls intermediary institutions, which were the old unions, the working men's clubs, which were actually like a buffer in between people and the state. If you actually think about what Thatcher did, is she used central government power to clear out that intermediate layer. So there was now no longer a buffer between the state and the people or the workers, whatever we'll put it that way, which is a different understanding of Thatcher from the one you might get from libertarians, right? And this is something that is consistent with Juvenal and something that I worry about, i.e. we could get a revolution, they could even be this takeover of based billionaires or whatever, and we end up with something even more centralized or even more totalizing than what we have now. So
well, as Elon and Sam Altman and Zuckerberg compete on the AI front, that is a consolidation and centralization of power if they achieve their goals of...
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they literally, it's ownership of all the knowledge in all the world. I don't know, you can't get more centralized.
I feel this is the thing when you go into these things, what you've now said about Thatcher, it's like, okay, well, shit. Maybe I need to reconsider my whole theoretical framework about being a libertarian and being a conservative. Yeah, maybe the unions were a good thing. Maybe I'm going back to like you go around in circles sometimes.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, and then I think about other things. I think, well, I look at the state of things in despair and I think, well, people are so far away from actually being organized, actually becoming a true counter elite to the current ruling class. And then I look back and think, well, look how organized the unions were in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and they were absolutely, way more organized, for example, than Tommy and his lads.
Yeah.
Way more organized than anybody I know. Way more organized than any kind of dissident group, left or right, that you can think of today. And yet they lost.
Unions are terrible for wealthy conservatives.
Of course they are. Yeah, of course. Because they're on the side of labor and higher wages. You see, this is what else I've thought about, which is that if you think about the incentives of the employer as against the incentives of labor, I've often, in my darker moments again, wondered if mass immigration has been a kind of punishment on the unions and on the old working class. Because if you have a massively increased labor pool, it's basically it's union busting, isn't it? You're basically just bringing in people from elsewhere, or you outsource it over there. And this is something, if any libertarians watch this, I used to be one. I wrote a book on free market economics and Mises and Hayek and so on. Classic free trade theory, Ricardo, talked about how there needs to be two things held constant for comparative advantage to work. The classic example with, wine to Portugal, is it? And that whole thing. If you read Ricardo, he holds labor and capital constant, i.e. he assumes that the amount of workers in England doesn't move. and the amount of workers in Portugal stay constant, and that the capital doesn't leave England and go to India or China or Mexico, that it stays there and is, quote, reallocated to more productive ends, and that the labour is reallocated to more productive ends. That's how the free trade theory works. But of course, those two constants don't hold in the real world. Capital is mobile and labour is mobile. So I mean, what I have thought, I mean, those are the four freedoms of the EU. Goods, capital, labour, forget what the fourth one is, services. So it strikes me that you need to hold at least one of those four constant. Otherwise you don't have, I mean, we were talking about community. You don't have, I mean, if all of them are mobile, you don't have anything. The government has to fix certain things down and say, this is sacred. We don't move this. I remember reading Roger Scruton years ago and him saying, well, look, and for some regulations, because if it was up to the free market, they'd stick a McDonald's on top of the Eiffel Tower or in the Champs-Élysées or something. And the French government rightly say, yeah, you're not allowed to do that. Right. So there has to be some common sense when it comes to this. But I do, coming back, I do wonder about mass immigration. If you think about it in a class way, well, the working class, who are now called quote unquote far right, right? I mean, they would have been in unions 30 years ago. It's the same people.
So on this podcast, you are definitely hearing me talk about Bitcoin a lot. Well, why? We live in a really strange time with governments driving inflation with their reckless spending and endless money printing. There is a way out of this. There is a way to protect your money, and that is by stacking Bitcoin. I've made loads of shows about Bitcoin. You can go and research this, you can go and read the books, but the truth is, it is the hardest money ever created. If you are interested in protecting your financial future, it's time for you to get on the Bitcoin train. I've been stacking Bitcoin personally and through my businesses since 2017. It's protected me, it's secured my family's future, and it also strengthens all of my businesses. So if you want to start stacking Bitcoin, where do you do it? Well, for me, it's with Gemini. They're a fully licensed, full reserve exchange and custodian, so they give you a secure way for you to buy and own your Bitcoin. There's no risks and no funny business. So if you're serious about stacking Bitcoin the right way, head over to Gemini.com, which is GEMINI.com. I really think you should, not because I think you should become a Bitcoiner or buy Bitcoin. I think you would find it really interesting. And it's making me think about certain things that are happening in that world at the moment. So, yeah, excuse me if I'm telling you things you already know, but like the foundational idea of Bitcoin is decentralized. I can freely trade with you. There's no middleman who can stop me. It's a fixed limit money, so it can't be inflated, and it decentralizes power, blah, blah, blah. But there's been significant changes in the world of Bitcoin over the last couple of years. There's a guy called Michael Saylor, who had a company called Strategy, data company, feels like a Palantir before a Palantir, and he's accumulated a lot of Bitcoin, over 1% of the supply. BlackRock have become involved, and they've created ETFs. So now you buy the ETF, not the Bitcoin. And then there's talk within government of removing the right to self-custody. They have prosecuted people who've run services where you can obfuscate some of your transactions. And so I can put a hat on that says Bitcoin itself is another tool that was created for control, or they've realized the threat and now they want to just control this as well, because it
More
does.
likely, I would say.
Yeah. And then you think, shit, they've got their hands in every pie.
What it will boil down to, the whole Bitcoin dream,
Yeah.
sadly, is what it will boil down to is you and whose army. That's what it ultimately will get at. Are you going to take on the American army? Or the British army or whatever?
Well, can you have a coup by Bitcoiners become, is there enough of them become powerful enough? Like, do I become a politician here? And does my friend Freddie New become one? And then my friend Alan Farrington? And then in government, we've got maybe 8 Bitcoiners that become 10, 12. And like, it's a little bit utopian, but that's what a lot of Bitcoiners would say, is that's the world where we want to try and build.
But I mean, the only flaw in the plan
Yeah.
is if it's truly decentralized. If you wanted to do it, you'd have to be actually you'd actually like have to be organized like Lenin and the Bolsheviks or any other. You'd actually have to agree on strategy and ways forward, and
Maybe
because
we are.
if you just wait for it to happen bottom up, it's not going to happen. But if you were actually organized, then who knows? Stranger things have happened in history.
Well, this is something I will push Curtis on, because he is a Bitcoiner. Okay, just one area we haven't gone into enough, and I do want to just get into with you before we finish, is we haven't talked enough about the media and the role of the media.
Mm-hmm.
I am regularly disappointed by them and highly skeptical of them, and I love doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I believe I'm not being controlled. I haven't had any knocks at my door yet. I haven't had anyone offer me some money to spin particular narratives, but I wonder how big a problem they have been, and can that be broken down?
Mm-hmm.
Can we get an enlightenment through a more decentralized media?
So I would say that over time, the story of social media, which is what this is, has been much like the Bitcoin scenario, where the powers that be, because it's like it in every field, something takes off, it's the Wild West, cowboys and so on, and then power realizes it and regulation starts catching up.
Yeah. Or
they start kind of wanting to control that as well.
Ofcom will come for us.
Right. And in this space, I would say it took them a while, but at this point where we're 10, 15 years deep into people having these sorts of conversations online, there's probably a lot more, how can I say, like influencers who have taken money or are pushing certain lines or just straight up working for certain people. There have been cases on both the left and the right.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it can be different factions. It's not always the same people. It could be the Democrat Party, it could be Republicans, could be whoever, foreign governments in many cases, Russia in some cases. These things have all come out. They're documented. You can look at them. So that's one thing where they've kind of figured out, oh, right, well, social media is the thing now. So let's get our message in that space. Another one is more insidious, though, which is, to what extent are people like us, or anyone really who has like a news or a news adjacent podcast, still downstream from actual media? And so often I've noticed, I very often noticed that whatever trends or whatever people talk about on their shows and so on, increasingly is just kind of one click away from, i.e. the impetus for people talking about it has come from the news in the first place.
Yeah. But there is an incentive model for that. So this is something we have to fight. So when we plan a show, say this one afterwards, and it goes onto YouTube, we have to decide the title, and we have to decide the thumbnail titles.
Yeah.
Now, if you go into AI, we plug in our transcript and we say, suggest some titles for YouTube.
Who really controls the world?
Yeah. It will say, it'll be who controls the world, or whatever, something like that. Something, and it tries to give you ones that it knows will work. You won't believe what Neema just exposed. Now, we tend to not get sucked in it too much. I would love to just release a show that just had Neema Parvini and a picture of you. No fucker's going to watch it. No. You might get 10,000 views. You get Faraz. For Asmodad, yeah. So I think we were like his second ever podcast. We released a show with him that's like it's over 100,000 views on YouTube. It completely outperformed what we expected, but that's down to the title.
I have a channel. I've got a machine. I call it the Sloppinator.
The Sloppinator,
Right?
yeah.
I come up with my own title.
Yeah.
And it gives it a score. It'd be like, that's 48. Okay, I'll click the button. It'd be like, so-and-so, expose. And you just have to run with it because otherwise it's the difference between... So I absolutely understand the incentives behind the algorithm, but this is what I'm getting at. Does it then become its own kind? I mean, in a way, it becomes its own little nudge mechanism or control grid because we're all being pushed along by the same algo. But
where I was going with this is like the incentives of the independent media aren't too far away from the mainstream media. Especially if you need the money. We don't need the money. We're okay. We're in a good place here, so we can come do what the fuck we want. But if you're not, if you need to get to 1 million views on your YouTube video because you need the $3,000 of ads, then Charlie Kirk is murdered, assassinated. You've got to make your Charlie Kirk show. COVID happens. You've got to do your COVID shows. So if stuff is being pushed in the mainstream, well, that's what people are going to then be searching for, and you've got to do it. And so I see what you're saying, but I think it's the incentives of the individual themselves. It's like, what are we meant to do to fight that?
Yeah, and this is it. This is it, though. It's like, well, you kind of we're trying in our small little way to show a bit of resistance to this massive machine that we're all part of. But it's got an extraordinary mechanism of just being able to contain and commodify every form of resistance and then sell it back to people. It's the Che Guevara t-shirt again and again.
Yeah.
Only yours has got, so it's very hard. I don't know what to, and this is where I also have those moments where I was like, shall I just go and play my pickleball and drink my coffee and not worry about all this? Because it's so vast.
Well, it's more like what's the point? You really self-reflect. You go, what is the point? Mm-hmm. If I can't make change, and it's not making me happy, and actually I'm potentially contributing to making it worse. I think about that a lot. Mm-hmm. Like screaming at people on Twitter, "You socialist," or calling everyone I disagree with a commie. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm part, like you mentioned, being part of the clown show. Mm-hmm. Like, am I just another clown in the clown show? Like, what's the fucking point?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I've been through all this as well.
Hold on, Connor, why are you laughing?
It's very depressing, this, but also very true. And also, yes, you are a clown.
but can it be the opposite? Can it not be depressing? Can it be enlightening? And actually, you just free yourself of the chains.
No.
And go and live a good life. I can play tennis every day.
Yeah, we can. But how do you get to that mind frame?
Just get in the car on the way over this and go, I'm done. I mean, I still want to make a show, but maybe make more episodes like this rather than getting some backbench Labour MP and discussing their, I don't know, reforms to employment laws. Because what's the point?
I mean, it's possible that over enough time, through enough of this kind of discourse and so on, that enough people may have a kind of revolution in the mind.
Yeah.
Because in a way, it has to happen there first, which is something I've talked about the boomer truth regime in the past. It was a big topic we can't really get into, but in a way, until people have had these internal revolutions within their own minds, it's going to be difficult to make bigger change in the real world, because still, even in the current discourse, the sorts of people who are thinking along the lines I am or you are, probably like very small. I
think it's growing though.
It's growing, but it's still relatively small. Like you said earlier on, some people might think you're think you're out of your tree or something.
But I
in
think
this way.
I think the majority of the people who are going to vote reform are essentially adjacent to this.
They just
Yes.
don't know it.
Yeah, they don't know it, but they're kind of like they see it's all broken and not working, and so reform is like, oh, and I think if reform doesn't work, they're going to go, oh, none of this works.
Yeah, and in fact, I would probably guess that a lot of reform voters are probably more clued on than I typically give them credit for. Which is why, I mean, my great hope at the moment, the only hope I see on the horizon, there's a chap called Rupert Lowe, who I think
Rupert. He's been in here twice.
I mean, Tories are in a terrible state. I couldn't even remember the name of Kemi Badenoch earlier on. I think Gendrick is already a busted flush because he was the immigration minister during Boris Wave, and he's got other comments that he's made in the past that in an actual campaign would slaughter him. Plus, he doesn't have the charisma, right? Rupert Lowe, however, I see in him the sort of character who might be belligerent enough to do what is necessary. And if he was able somehow to take over the Tory party, and I've talked about this openly a number of times already.
We've talked about this.
Yeah, if Rupert Lowe was able to take over the rotting husk of the Conservatives and flank reform from the right, you'd say, or from his position, I reckon over the course of a campaign, a lot of those reform voters would ditch Nigel and go for, if they truly believed that it was a Tory party in Rupert's image, I think that is something that could break the spell. Because I mean, truly in my heart of hearts, don't believe reform. I don't even believe they're a proper political party. I think they're a kind of like a media outfit masquerading as a party. But I've seen enough from them to know that they're not serious. They're not truly prepared to do what needs to be done. Whereas Rupert might be. That's my. We should end on the white pill, I guess.
Yeah. Well, look, we've had the same conversation about Rupert. I don't think Rupert's the kind of person who can be captured. I think he's pretty based.
Yeah.
I think he's a proper conservative. And Restore, for me, is his advert.
Mm-hmm.
Come and get me. And with the Conservatives as broken as they are, I think I don't disagree. I'm not sure if you can do it by 2029, but 2034, maybe. We will see. I really enjoyed this. I knew I would. I just knew this was going to be great. I'd love to do it again sometime in the future. I'd love to sit there with you and Curtis at some point. I think that would be fascinating. But
we'll be even disagree on a lot as well. But, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. But I was asking the AI this morning about the alignments, and they said there's certain things that I think directionally you're looking in the same place.
That's right. Yeah, I would agree. In the same ballpark.
Yeah. Anyone listening, please do go check out Neema Parvini's books, Populist Delusion, Prophet's Doom. Anything else you want to tell people about? I'm more than happy.
I think that it's not out yet, but in the coming months, I should have a new book out, which is called Applied Elite Theory, which is a collection elaborating on some of the stuff I talk about in those two books. So look out for it. This is the first I've mentioned it anywhere. So
amazing. Look, I really appreciate you and I appreciate everything you've done. And I want to talk to you about Shakespeare next time we meet. So thank you. And thank you to everyone for listening.